Welcome back to my devlog on the road to making a standalone VR game. Today I'm going to talk about my experience learning how to do things with code that I normally relied on with animation, such as lerping, using animation curves in Logic, and so on. This was a big personal goal for myself with this R&D phase. A lot of my old works had huge animator state machine logic and an over-reliance on animation events, which quickly became messy and unreliable. Not to mention the overall cost of having too many animators in the scene, so I felt it was important that I figure out how to delegate some of that to code.
I'm sorry.
This is where lerping came to the rescue. Being able to animate things purely with code was such a game changer for me. If you're new to development, I highly encourage you to learn how to lerp and also do time-based logic as soon as possible. Early on, I tried very simple lerps to move a cube up and down, side to side. Once I was comfortable enough with this, I then started adding in animation curves, which was really simple to handle in Certain Trigger. Doing these eventually led me down the path of learning how to do time-based logic as well, and using countdowns, which I then started using for actions like putting in a wait time in between two lerps. So if the cube goes up, there's a wait time for about 4 seconds, followed by the cube moving back down. I'm actually kind of surprised that I did any of my previous projects without ever using lerp or time-based logic like this. My first usable example of what I had learned was to apply this to a bridge that would rise and lower per block. And you might have already seen these in my previous devlog when I was showing the workshop scene. I kept one of my early attempts, even though it was wrong. It looked kind of cool with the blocks alternating up and down, and you never know when those might come in handy. With each variation, I tried to advance the bridge logic more to get more and more used to the lerp system. I eventually added in enter triggers, so when the player gets close enough, the bridge will rise and then lower automatically, or it will only rise when the player is in the vicinity and then lower as soon as the player leaves. And eventually I settled on making a variation where the bridge rises and lowers on loop, but triggering particle effects based on the position of each block. So this would be getting the transform of each block, and then when it meets a certain height, I would then transport the particle effect to that position and play the particle. Lerps are great to someone completely beginner level like me, because just being able to do this without relying on an animator opens up so many doors now. I don't need to have a separate animator controller for every small movement now. What I also like about this is, compared to relying on an animator, is that doing things this way also makes it simple to tweak positions and timing of the movement anytime mid-game by just changing the variables I created for it. Something I couldn't do with animations, which isn't able to adapt to dynamic changes during gameplay, unless you want to animate every single variation beforehand and have tons of transitions to make sure it all flows together. It's just not viable in a game environment. So pretty much every moving non-character you see in this workshop scene right now is handled by logic completely, no animators involved. The platforms that are moving back and forth, the bridges that are rising and dropping, all handled by logic. In my last devlog, I did show a grapple hook experiment I had working. But before working on that grapple hook, I had to learn how to use lerp to move the player physically. And you see these pressure plates here, they trigger the player lerp event and transport you across the other island. After I got this working in a basic form, I worked my way through adapting it to a grapple hook mechanic, where the lerp is used to move the player towards the grapple target position. It felt like a huge breakthrough for me, being able to apply lerping to a usable gadget, so I was quite happy with that. The rest of the grapple hook logic was pretty simple, since I've already used raycasting in my previous project when some of the bosses launched body parts or weapons towards the player, so learning how to lerp was literally the final piece of the puzzle that I was missing. Another element to my over-reliance on animators in the past was with animation events, which are difficult to work with in animations that can be interrupted or have transitions that blend from one to another. So to reduce that habit, I dedicated some time to learn how to read what point of an active animation is at using an update event to trigger actions without the use of an animation event. This has already proven useful when dealing with a large amount of NPC animations in the workshop scene, but I'll talk more about that in a future devlog episode. Now don't get me wrong, animation events are still great and I do still use them, but with this extra knowledge of handling it entirely by code means I can move more important ones over to pure logic now. which cleans up my events up quite a bit so I don't have tons of animation events on a single object. Sticking with the theme of trying to reduce the amount of animators I rely on, I also wanted to create a music system that was handled purely by logic. So for context, in the past I handled soundtrack for my previous worlds purely by animators using int, bool, trigger parameters to switch to different tracks or to mute the music at specific moments. Now these animators that I would have for the world would be so big, and the problem with this is that the further a project got in development, the messier and harder these animated playlists became to tweak or reorder. They got super limiting and felt like tech debt when wanting to switch to any music at any point, with the amount of transitions required to cover everything and becoming an unoptimized animator in the process. Add the save system on top of this and it became a nightmare to handle, with the need to jump to any track from the loading screen. So that required even more parameters just to make sure the animations transition to the correct track when loading a save file. So whilst my new system requires more refining, I'm quite happy with the new system that I've made. I have a central music handling object that allows me to feed any track I want, fade it, fade in, crossfade with another track, without having to worry about setting up transition lines in the animator. With the change of a few variables, I can pretty much control the track that's playing, the volume, the fade time, any time which would have otherwise been fixed values in an animation. So this will make it much more easier for me now to just jump between different tracks mid-game. Now I know all of these are super basic concepts to any programmer, but these were legitimately stuff that I didn't know how to do when working on my previous projects. So all the previous worlds and games I'd made, I had no idea how to do all this. So this was a big milestone for me to kind of step away from over-reliance on animator logic. These will definitely make my next game easier and more optimized to create for, as well as making it possible to do more advanced things. So if you are a new programmer or like beginner level like me, I hope this is kind of inspiring you to go out and learn these concepts as well, because it'll help you so much. Anyways, thanks for watching this devlog. In the next one, I'll most likely talk about the NPCs I have in the workshop scene. So please look forward to that. See ya. Bullet Time Agent is coming to Steam and Meta Store later this year. Two of my close friends over at Sci-Fi Studios are handling the port to both pcvr and Quest. It'll also support desktop play as well. Please show some love and support by giving that game a wishlist on Steam. Link is in the description, and it'll help a lot with giving the game visibility as it gets close to launch.
Let us decide who is most worthy through battle.